Hi, this is section 3.2 for Math 980. And what we're going to do today is something very similar, well, almost identical to what we do in a section of statistics. So for those of you taking statistics after this course, you will be working with these kinds of problems as well. So what we have are these groups of data. So we have values for x, values for y. Now in this particular problem, number 3, we don't know what they mean. We don't know what x represents or what y represents. But anyway, what they want us to do is, first of all, draw what's called a scatter plot. So we would plot each of these points. So this first point is the point 2, 11, or 1.1. So when x is 2, y is 1.1. So when x is 2, y is 1.1 would probably be right about there. When x is 4, y is 1.7. So 4, 1.7. When x is 7, y is 2.2. So 7, 2.2. And then another 7 is 2.4. So probably right here. And then a 9 is 2.8. So this picture of all the points plotted is called a scatter plot. So we have our scatter plot. So the first part of this question, they want us to identify, they give you 4 choices of scatter plots and identify which one it is. So for me, this one was D. Okay. Some vocabulary. The x variable is always called the independent variable, and it goes on the horizontal axis typically. And then the y is the dependent. And the reason that they have these names is because we typically would find the x first and then figure out what the y was. So let's say someone wanted to weigh bears in the wild. Well, you're not going to walk out to the wild and ask a bear to step on a scale. But what they could do from a distance is perhaps measure the length of the bear using different measuring devices. And so they would collect the lengths of all the bears. So those would be the independent variables. And then they could use those lengths to make a prediction about the weight. And then sort of fact check it with maybe, some bears in the zoo that they could weigh or something like that. Anyway, so the independent variable is what happens first. They first go get the height, the length of the bear. And then from the length, they would determine what that height was, or what the weight was, I'm sorry. So then that would be dependent. So just think of it as the independent comes first, and then the dependent is something that happens based off of the independent. Okay, so we have this scatter plot, and what we want to do is we want to look at the trend. So what's happening with this? So we would call this linear because the dots are basically in a straight line. And then we would call it a positive correlation because that straight line tends to go up to the right as I'm moving from left to right. It goes up. So it's like having a positive slope. Okay. So in this question it says the scatter plot shows that y tends to be blank. Well, the y value tends to be higher since the scatter plot appears to have, or as x is higher. So as x gets bigger, y gets higher, right? Since the scatter plot appears to have a linear pattern because the dots are basically in a straight line, the data have a positive correlation because the slope of that straight line is positive. Use the trend line, y equals, okay, so what they do is then there's what we call a trend line. So if I was to take a line and sort of, figure out a line that fits these points the best, that would represent the line the direction that it's going, like a straight line, I might put it somewhere like there. We call this a trend line. Well, once there's a line on the graph, then there's going to be an equation of a line. Remember, the equation of a line is y equals mx plus b. And in these problems, they're going to give you what those equations are. So in this case, it's y equals 0.24x plus 0.7. So in statistics, you'll figure out the equation of that line, but in this course, you're not going to have to worry about that. They're going to give that to you. But what they want you to do is complete the 3 ordered pairs for x equals 5, 6, and 7. Or I'm sorry, 5, 6, and 8 on mine, that fall on the trend line. Provide the ordered pairs in the form x, y. So we plotted our points. Those were points that were collected from the field, from observations. We determined that they're basically in the shape of a straight line and that it's a positive correlation. Then we put a trend line on there that kind of represents the direction that those dots are going. That line is going to have an equation, and in this case, they give us that equation. So this equation represents where this line is in space. And now they want us to find 3 points. Notice that the 5, the 6, and the 8 weren't in my original data. So I can use this line to make predictions about what 5, 6, and 8 would give me for y. And how do I do that? Well, I replace the x with each of those numbers. So I'm first going to do the 5. I would put that in my calculator, and my answer for the 5 would be 1.9. So this is the point 5. I put 5 in, I get 1.9 out, and they want it as an ordered pair, just like that. Put my x in, this is the y I get out. So then what? Then I would go back and I would do it for 6. What do I get when I put 6 in there? I get 2.14, and so my next point would be 6, 2.14. And then my last one is 8. And if I put 8 into that equation, I get 2.62. So, comma, 8, 2.62. And this is how they want your answer, as 3 ordered pairs. Okay, so then the last part of that question, they say sketch a graph of the trend line equation on the scatter plot. So this is, so you have 4 more choices, right? So for starters, the dots have to look the same as they did in question A. So you can already eliminate a couple of your pictures because they weren't the correct scatter plots to begin with. Once you isolate it to the last 2 that do have the correct scatter plots, then just know that your trend line will have to be the one that fits those dots the best. So one of my other options, the trend line was like this. Well, that doesn't fit those dots, so that can't be my answer. So you can just sort of eyeball that and pick the one that fits it the best. All right, well, so in this one, then they have question E, which really is just asking the same thing that this one did, but in a different way. It says, predict a y value for x equals 3. So the reason we use these trend lines is so that we can make predictions for x equals 3. So this is the same thing. Then I'm going to plug a 3 in here, and I'm going to calculate it, and I get 1.42. So my answer is 1.42. They don't ask me to put it in an ordered pair. If I had, it would look like this. But all I'm going to do is say, well, the predicted y value is 1.42. Okay, so that kind of goes through all the different items that they're going to have you do. Now, you can actually plot these points using Excel, and I have another video. So open up the second lecture video, and I'll show you how to plot these using Excel. Then you can also put the prediction line on there with it. Okay, so let's go over a couple of the vocabulary terms. So remember, a linear pattern. Something has a linear pattern if the points basically lie in a straight line. Okay, and then the correlation could be positive if x gets bigger, we'll say if y gets bigger as x gets bigger. And then it would be negative. So that this would also identify, you know, a positive slope of something. It'd be negative if y gets smaller as x gets bigger. Okay, so in other words, if as x is getting bigger, my y is coming down, then that would give me a negative slope. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to talk about is question 8, because they ask you to find this thing called a residual. Okay, so question 8 says, chicken sandwiches are often advertised as a healthier alternative to beef because many are lower in fat. A researcher collected data on chicken sandwiches from various fast food restaurants. The equation of the line of best fit is, and what's interesting is they give you this in words, and they do this in some of the beginning problems as well. So normally I would just have this be y equals, and then this is my slope times my x plus b, and they've just reordered it and they've used words instead of the x and y. So you'll be doing this kind of thing where you plug in several numbers for x on some other problems, but they've written the x as the actual words that it means. Okay, so hopefully by doing this one, it'll kind of clarify that. So it says that the equation of the line, so this would be the equation of the line, my calories, which is my y value, equals 184.3 plus 13.8 times my grams of fat, which is my x value. And they want me to find the residual for 20 grams of fat and 455 calories. What's important to know is this piece here is an observation. This is an actual observation where they looked at a chicken sandwich or whatever, and it had 20 grams of fat, and it turns out it had 455 calories. So that's a point. That happened. But then what they want you to do is take that 20 grams and put it into the equation to see what the equation would have predicted. So in other words, it would be calories equals 184.3 plus 13.8 times 20. And they want to figure out what that is. So on my calculator, 13.8 times 20 plus 184.3 gives me 460.3 calories. So if I had put the 20 grams of fat into my equation, it would have predicted that that sandwich would have had 460.3 calories. But when I actually measured the 20 grams of fat, it came up with 455. What is the difference between those two? That's what a residual is. So notice here I have residual equals actual minus equation. So my actual was 455 minus what I got from my equation, which is 460.3. And so my answer ended up being negative 5.3. And then it says the residual is positive or negative. Mine was negative, which indicates that the equation overestimated the number of calories. My equation was more than the actual number of calories. It was an overestimate. And whenever there's an overestimation, your residual will be negative. And if it had underestimated it, your residual would have been positive. Okay, so be sure to look at the other video where I show you how to use Excel to plot your scatter plots. I mean, this one was pretty easy because you only had 5 numbers, but some of them are pretty lengthy, and it would be a real pain to try to plot all those by hand. So look at my video on how to do that using Excel and how to do the trend line, and good luck on the rest of this assignment.